podcast featuring Mike
and Beth.
And we're back again. And I want to go ahead and just say, hey, thank you to everyone that commented and liked it and listened last week. That proved my point to Beth. She really thought only one or two people would listen or even like it or anything. And we had, sit down, this is going to shock y'all, 29 listeners.
How do you know? Now, are those individual listeners, or is that like my mom listened 29 times?
Well, according to the stats, it was 29 listeners from 23 different devices. So some people liked it enough, they listened twice from the same device.
That's good to know.
That's impressive.
That's
amazing.
Shocking.
Hey, so as always, as we talked about last week, we are going to go through what we consider the 4 pillars, the intersection of our life. We're going to focus on marriage and family and careers and ministry. And we're going to do that today. We're going to dive right in here in just a second. But I'm going to go ahead and give a tease. At the end, we're going to, Beth does not know this. She hasn't read these. But I'm going to read the comments that were left from last week's episode. We also had a listener send in a question. So our very first question that we get to answer, Beth, this is going to be at the end of the podcast, along with the origin story of how we came up with the title, Hey, Are You Still There?
Oh, that is going to be really good.
Oh, it's going to be great. Mm-hmm. And so, hey, if you're still with us now after the first minute, hang with us. We've got an awesome show for you today. We're going to dive in with marriage. Beth and I are actually, I wanted to do this kind of fun. Believe it or not, there's times when Beth and I do fight and argue. And I told her this past week a couple times when we were arguing about something, I said, I really want to do a podcast when we're arguing, because then that will get the true essence of what a marriage really is. And she just kind of rolled her eyes as usual. But today we have had a day-long fight, and it has to do with Christmas. And really coming down to the big 2 questions: when is it too early to set up for Christmas, and how much do you set up? So Beth, go ahead. Tell us your feeling, your opinion on the subject of Christmas and decorating, and then I'll share mine. So go ahead. What are you thinking?
Okay, so ideally, what I believe is that we should begin to decorate for Christmas very soon after Halloween. However, I do recognize that you still have fall decorations and Thanksgiving in there. So I think you can still pay tribute and you can still celebrate Thanksgiving while also doing Christmas. And the way that you do that is you leave up some of your Thanksgiving, fall, pumpkins, all of that stuff, and then you go ahead and put up your Christmas tree, because that's one of the big things is the tree. And the reason I feel this way is because it is a lot of work to decorate the tree. And I tend to be the one that does all of the ornaments on the tree. And so if I'm going to go to that amount of work, I want to be able to enjoy it for the maximum period. I will also add that maybe I wouldn't say that we have to decorate so early if you didn't insist that we take down the tree so soon after Christmas. Because usually the day or 2 days after Christmas, you want the tree out. And so for me, I'm like, is 20 or 25 days, or even, if you do right after Thanksgiving, that's just not enough time. So again, you can gradually add your Christmas decorations in, but go ahead and get that tree up.
All right, so we're recording this on Saturday, November the 9th.
Yes.
And we got into a fight today over decorating the house today. She wanted me to go into our basement, crawl space, pull out the tree, pull out the decorations, so she could start decorating the house.
And also so I can look and inventory what we have, because everybody has all the things out that you can buy. So how do I know what to buy if I don't remember everything that I have?
Growing up, did you decorate early? Like, how early did you decorate growing up?
Well, no, but like...
Well, how early? What day was it? Answer the question.
I think it was after Thanksgiving. But again, when you get married, you start your own family and your own tradition. So you don't have to do everything exactly the way you did it when you were growing up.
Okay, we got married in 1998.
Yeah.
Up until 2020, when did we put up the decorations?
The day after Thanksgiving. But COVID changed everything.
Okay, the reason COVID changed everything is because Beth got very depressed like everyone else in America.
Yeah.
And so being the loving, good husband that I am, Everyone knows how compassionate I am, how I
yeah.
care for others and think of others first. I said, honey, I'm going to do something special for you. So our daughter and I surprised Beth, and we put up the decorations way early that year.
Yes.
And to cheer you up.
And it worked. It was amazing and beautiful.
And now every November 1st since COVID, Beth goes into this mysterious depression again. And the only thing that will cure it will be decorating the house.
That is not true. I do not go into a mysterious depression. I'm just saying that, like, I feel like this is the right time. It just feels right to go ahead and put up the tree. I'm going to leave some of the pumpkins. I'll do our Thanksgiving leaf tree. All of that, we can leave that up. But the Christmas tree should go up.
All right. If you're listening this week and you feel like leaving a comment, let's do a poll. When should Christmas decorations go out? Let's just see. Because Beth thought she was going to prove her point to me today. And every store we went in today running errands, she asked the cashier or the waitress or whoever, hey, when should you put out Christmas decorations? And everybody, 100% said after Thanksgiving.
But I don't think they love Christmas as much as we do. So I think that's different.
Who is we?
I don't think they love Christmas as much as I do. So I think that's different. I don't think this is my favorite holiday. Just like, okay, Maria's favorite holiday is Halloween. So she does probably September and October. So it's sort of like for your favorite, you should get to have your decorations out longer. That's really that's what we should do. That'll be our new tradition. So you can pick your favorite holiday and you can decorate longer for that.
I wasn't even going to plan on having this fight today. I had already written on there Christmas decor because I was already angry at one of my neighbors. Halloween, obviously, October 31st. I came home on November 1st, and the guy across the street already had up Christmas inflatables on November 1st. Now, they're not even that great. And the guy next door to me, we have amazing neighbors. Dave and Megan have lived beside of us forever. Dave, like Maria, loves Halloween. Mm-hmm. Dave goes all out for Halloween. He's the guy that puts up the 12-foot skeleton that has a chain, that has an 8-foot tall skeleton dog, and he has jack-o'-lanterns and zombies and witches. He decks it all out. And it's very tasteful.
Yes.
It's very well done.
Yes.
I drove home. I looked out on one side of my driveway is still Halloween.
Yes.
Across the street,
it's Christmas.
It's Christmas. That should be against the law. Well, I'm saying we are still in the shadow of Halloween, and you and that crazy person across the street are wanting to decorate for Christmas.
We are not in the shadow of Halloween because even Maria will tell you, who loves Halloween, that once Halloween's happened, it's happened. So once it's over, you immediately begin the transition.
Okay, well, let's remember that December 26th.
No, that has nothing to do with
then Leslie, I rest my case.
There are 12 days of Christmas. There are 12 days of Christmas that come. Gosh. And so Christmas, that's debatable. No one debates when Halloween is. People can debate when Christmas is over. So that one...
I don't think anybody can debate when Halloween is. It's the same day every year.
That's what I said. I said no one debates when Halloween is over, but you can debate the Christmas season. We don't have they might call it spooky season, but everyone knows, like, when Halloween comes, it's over. We need to end this fight because I'm getting frustrated. And I feel my blood pressure go up. Let's talk about something else.
Let's talk about something else.
Yeah.
Since you're all fired up, let's talk about ministry. Beth, tell everybody what you're doing tomorrow. Now, by the time you listen to this podcast, we're going to try to release these on Sunday afternoons. So this is all what you're going to hear Beth is going to do has already happened. But what are you doing tomorrow?
I am speaking at church tomorrow. So I will be, it is our 11-year anniversary service for our nonprofit and church. And so I am the guest speaker tomorrow.
Okay, that brings up something I had in my notes I want to talk about.
Okay.
Are you a speaker or a preacher?
Well, that I would consider myself a guest speaker because I don't regularly preach, and I guess...
What's the difference in speaking and preaching? Would preaching not be the spiritual...
Okay, I'm the guest preacher.
I don't know. I'm asking you.
But I'm not a preacher by profession. I don't go and I don't preach routinely.
There's a lot of preachers who think they're preachers by profession that suck.
I don't routinely. preach. Therefore, I would not classify myself as a preacher. But this goes back to, too, I think this is me, because like when you look at some people's LinkedIn profile or they describe themselves on things, they'll be like, I'm an artist and an author, and it may be like, I wrote a children's, like when I say children, not a book for children, but I wrote a book that I stapled together in 3rd grade, therefore I'm an author. I don't consider, like I have criteria, I guess, in my own mind about how often you would have to do something to authentically be able to call yourself that. And so I do not consider myself established enough in the preaching area to be a preacher. Therefore, I would say I am a guest speaker.
Okay, it sounds like you're sexist against women preachers.
No, I'm not.
All right,
Obviously,
let me ask you this: you are an amazing communicator. I tell people all the time, I think you're a better communicator than I am, and so I think you're gonna knock out the park as always. You've never given a bad speech or sermon or whatever you want to call it. How do you go about putting something together? Like I preach every week, so I know how I put together a sermon. You who maybe, what do you preach 3 or 4 times a year at church? How do you go about putting, like, you know, it's like, what do you say? How do you put that together? What do you think about?
So this is really hard because I feel like I could speak all the time about certain topics that I care about or that I know about pretty easily. And I always prepare before I speak, but like even at work, like I give talks all the time. And so I could show up, like if you're like, hey, talk about employment discrimination for an hour, I could probably pretty easily do that and do a good job of it just because that's the work that I do all the time, and I wouldn't have to have a lot of preparation in place. But when I speak at church, I feel a lot more pressure, and I think it's because it's the weight of the spiritual nature of it, because when you're just speaking about something you're an expert in, like I'm talking about the law or I'm teaching a class or something like that, or even just talking about my career journey, any of those things, I don't feel that weight of like, well, what if I say something that's wrong? Or, what if I don't say things that people connect with? So I feel like there's a lot of pressure. I don't know. I was thinking about this too. I don't know if I would feel as much pressure if I preached all the time, because it's kind of like, well, if I had a bad Sunday, I would have the next Sunday to have a good Sunday. But when you don't do it that often, you, I think, feel a lot of pressure to do a really good job because, you may not speak again for 6 months or 9 months or, who knows how long. But as far as what I do, so I had the scripture. I knew I wanted to talk about Isaiah 58. I don't want to talk about everything I'm talking about, obviously, but because it talks about, rebuilding, renovating, restoring, the Re3 and Project Re3. So I knew I wanted to talk about that, but I didn't really know where I was going to go with it. And so I've just been reading it again and again. Now this one's a little different since I already knew the scripture that I wanted to talk about, but I just kept thinking about it and I was like, what am I going to say? And I had a really hard week this past week, just personally, professionally, everything, lots of things blowing up at work. And every time I sat down to think about what I would talk about, I just felt exhausted. It was like I had a mental block and I just was not creative. And then after reading that, I came home last night and I was like, I'm going to take a quick bath before we watch TV. And it all just kind of came to me. Not exactly, but I have now the flow, I have the ideas of what I'm going to talk about. And so I did voice dictation to get it onto my phone really quickly before I'd forget. Sometimes, though, I get inspiration, like if I'm running or walking or doing something, usually those times when I'm kind of, I don't know, my mind's a little quiet, or maybe I'm outside, I'll hear something or think about something, I'll be like, that's a good idea. If I'm ever asked to speak, I'm going to take this concept or this scripture and I'm going to talk about it. But for me, I usually have to carry it around in my head a while, and then I try to write it out, and then I shorten it to the point that it's just like a few bullet points.
Okay. I mean, you sound like a professional.
Oh, well, thanks. But I'm not.
Well, it certainly sounds like it. And so if you're listening right now to the podcast and you want to go back, you can hit the Project Re3 Facebook page. The video hopefully will be on there. And then we also have our own podcast that we do, which the sermon may or may not be up on, and that'll be on Spotify like this is, or other podcasting sites. But I think you're exactly right. I think your approach is what's natural. I think sermons work best when what you're saying means something to you.
Yeah.
I was just having a conversation with a friend of mine, and she is going through seminary right now. And part of her seminary training is she has to intern at a church, and she's interning at a church where she gets to preach like once a month. And so I made some comment about her sermon because she's told me she was preaching this Sunday. And she said, well, we do lectuary. And where this certain denomination, every church in this denomination
does
the same passage.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's no freedom. There's freedom in what you can say about that passage, but you kind of know and you're kind of locked into that.
Yeah.
And I think that would drive me crazy. And some people do well with that.
Yeah, some people would thrive with that because they don't want a blank canvas. Yeah. They would want that structure for them.
But I think you and I both are creatives, and we like to be able to have a blank canvas without any borders, without any constraints, and say, all right, God, what do you want me to paint? And that kind of feels almost like a paint by numbers, if you're comparing, which is fine. I mean, I'm not knocking that. And if this is what you do at your church, great. I am just saying I don't know how well I could thrive in that, but I think what you're doing is great.
Plus, I think when we've talked about this before, you talk about things you may be struggling with or that you've worked through right now. I mean, you and I do when we talk, and especially you, real life experience. And I think the other thing is, sometimes though, you wake up and you're like, I'm not ready to talk about that yet. Like, I'm not where I need to be yet, or it just doesn't feel right. Then you've got the flexibility to change,
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if not, I think that's the other part that would be hard about that, because I don't know. Yeah.
Well, that kind of leads in perfect to the career topic that I was going to talk about this today. Our son Josh, he's in high school, and I pick him up most days from school just because of Beth's schedule, being a lawyer and things, it just don't really work out for her a lot. I have a little bit more freedom. And so I'll pick him up, and we always say, hey, how was school? How'd it go? And he'll talk about school, and then he'll say, what'd you do today? And I'm like, and I'll just say, I just had work. Well, a couple weeks ago, Josh says, what do you do all day? I was like, what do you mean? He was like, well, you always say you worked, but I honestly have no idea what you do all day. And it got me thinking, what do I do all day? And it really isn't that much. That's why ministry is perfect for me. But no, it got me thinking. I think it is a question that people sometimes wonder, because I have met people before, and they say, what do you do? I'm like, I'm a pastor. And they'll say, is that all you do? And I'm like, what do you mean? Do you have another job? No. And in their minds, that's not enough to do full time. Now, I don't make a lot, so it's not like I'm bringing in some big bucks for minimal work. It's probably, it is what it is. But what do I do all day? It's very relational, and I think that's every pastor is different. I mean, there's some pastors that I know have to have a very regimented, go into the office, stay till lunchtime, go eat lunch, come back, be in the office. Like, everything is their office, just like they're at a corporation. I also know other pastors that are extremely lazy and, literally do nothing all week, and I'm sorry, it is. I mean, they can take advantage of it. I'm just very relational. I meet with people all the time, and I do a lot of counseling. I do a lot of meetings, and I feel like most days I'm either having breakfast or lunch with someone. If there's stuff going on at church, I always take at least some time every week to work on my sermon. Obviously, there's things that are happening when you're leading an organization like Project Read 3, whether it's with our Hope Center, which is our food pantry, clothing closet, counseling center, or it's with our various mission trips. And so there's just things, it's like you can't put your finger on one thing and say, Mike, I can't say this is what I do every day, because every single day is different. But I will say, I feel like my job is very, very relational. and it's hard to quantify or to put time on relationships. I don't know who's going to stop by, or
But you also have the things like literally sometimes though you're having to do all this stuff that nobody sees, where you go in and somebody did something at the church and they didn't set the chairs back up, so you're setting up the chairs, or you're tearing down tables, or like you'll go do some of the food pickups for our food pantry.
Yeah.
Or there'll be the things where a family will call, we've had this, like their house burns in a fire, and so you say, well, if you meet me at the Hope Center, I will go, and open that up so you can shop and get clothes and food. So I feel like you also, it's almost like you're on call. I think that's the thing people don't understand about ministry. Sometimes it may seem like you've got a lot of flexibility, or like they may think you're not doing that much, but like it's almost like you're always on call.
Yeah.
Always on call for the people. And you've got, I know you joke and say you've got one boss and that's God, but really you have like this whole congregation that's like, that I would feel like they deserve a piece of your time, they're your boss, sort of, and so that's hard too.
Right. Yeah. And, I preached a sermon not too long ago where I talked about your greatest ability is availability. And, my greatest ability is not communicating, it's not preaching, it's not counseling, it's just being available to God. And in that availability, sometimes it's like yesterday. I jumped in the box truck and drove to another town and picked up 5,000 pounds of food and brought it back and unloaded it at the Hope Center. I mean, that's, I don't know how many pastors are doing that, You can't do it if you stay in your office all day. I know
Right.
that. And so it's just about being available. So that's it. So if Josh is listening to this podcast, hopefully he will.
Which he's not,
Which
because
he's
when
not,
you
no.
described who's not listening, that would be
Yes.
anyone young.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
I'll get to that. The demographics are not.
They're not favorable in
They
that
don't
respect
listen.
for
The
the
young
next
people don't like us
generation.
yet.
Yeah.
So it gives us our last topic of the day, real quick: family. And I thought,
Oh,
what?
can I interject one thing about work though?
Yeah, I guess.
Oh, the one thing I was going to say that you made me think of. So one of the struggles we've had at work is going from I was in an office my entire life. Like I've always worked on site at work. And then COVID happened and we were at home and we were remote, and now we're hybrid. But it just made me think about what you're thinking about and talking about. Like everybody used to have this idea that you had to go sit in an office for it to count as work. And now I feel like that's shifting, and I think everybody in the workplace is going to have to try to figure out what is work, what does work mean, and where do you do it, and when do you turn it off and say no, and I don't know. Anyway, so I just thought that it made me think about that when you were talking about that
it's
being
funny.
out and about.
I just thought about this for people who are used to being in an office working 9 to 5.
Yeah.
Your company felt like that's the only time they had you.
Right.
But now that since COVID, a lot more people are working remotely.
They can have you anytime.
They feel like they can have you anytime.
Yeah.
So you know what? Now that I think about it, welcome to my world.
Well,
this is
here we
how
go.
this is how my
Okay.
life has been for 28 years.
Oh, yes.
Being at
Yeah.
everyone's disposal 24/7.
Yes, that's
You've done it 4 years and you're already tired of it. Imagine doing it 28 years, Beth.
the world feels really sorry for you.
Thank you.
Yes.
That does make me feel better. It
Yes.
does. It lifts me up. Knowing everyone else is sharing and what I'm going through.
They can probably hear the sarcasm that you can see on my face. But anyway, we will go to our next topic.
I was being serious.
Yeah.
All right. Family. One of the things that happened this past week, unless you were living under a rock, is our great country had an election.
I didn't think we were going to talk about politics.
Oh, we're not.
Or religion. Or, no, I'm just kidding.
This has nothing to do with who won, who lost, parties, any of that. This was the first time that we now have 4 of the 5 people in our house were able to vote.
But, yeah.
And our daughter was able to vote for the very first time this year. She's 19. This is her first election. It was a big one that she was able to vote in. And if I'm being completely honest, I didn't think she was going to vote. Maria, she's an artist. And artists sometimes as creatives struggle with procrastination. And so she kept telling us ahead of time she was going to pre-vote, whatever, and she didn't. She missed it. And then I was like, well, I guess she's not going to vote. And then the night before the election, Monday night, she said, all right, I'm going to go vote tomorrow morning. And I was like, yeah, right. Well, she did.
Yeah.
She got up that morning and she went and she was asking me, now, how do I vote? What do I do? And, I told her how the process worked and everything. And she went and voted. And I told her that night, I said, look, I don't care who you voted for, and I don't need to know who you voted for. I'm just very proud of you for voting. Because there's a lot of young people that take that right for granted.
Yeah.
So I was proud of our kids. But the thing that made me think about it is, we've tried to raise our kids in a household where we're not an overly political household. We're not a they're right, they're wrong type household.
Right.
We don't label people as parties, and we've kind of given our kids the freedom just to kind of grow and be shaped, Of course, there's influences from the family. There's influences from school. There's influences from TikTok, influences from the church, and trusting that they're going to make a wise and sound decision. Is that something you ever struggle with, Beth? Like, do you wish that we would have talked to our kids about politics more? Or are you comfortable with the amount that we talk to our kids, what little we have? I mean, looking at it now that we have two kids that are very close, we don't think about this when they're 5, right?
Yeah.
You don't think about how am I going to influence my 5-year-old to vote in 13 years.
Right.
But now we have a 19 and a 21-year-old. We just had a presidential election, maybe the biggest election in our lifetime. Do you think we handled it properly, or do you wish you had done more educating politically?
Well, I guess I always look back and wish I'd done more now with hindsight. I mean, I think if you could ask me about any topic, I'd be like, I don't know if I talked about that enough, or I don't know if I prepared my kids enough, because I think it's my nature to look back and second guess a little bit and doubt myself. But what I think we did right, that we would try to just, and we didn't even have to try, I think it just worked into conversation. But, there would be times when I would talk about, like, taxes or something, because, like, when Maria, or Jacob, they got jobs, and, like, what's this stuff coming out of my paycheck? Oh, that's taxes. Well, what's happening with your taxes? Well, different amounts may come out, depending on who's in charge of the government, but you also have to think about what those taxes go to, because we travel, and so we may go some places and the roads are really bad. Well, this must be a place that doesn't use a lot of their taxes to keep their roads in good shape, or we use a lot of the national parks and stuff, so we might talk about that. So I feel like in some ways we did a good job talking about those things, and I think they've heard us talk about too. I was talking about some of the things the candidates talked about, and the frustrations for me, because the candidates would focus on issues that maybe in their office they couldn't really influence,
But they were hot topics.
Yeah, exactly. But it's just hot topics to get everybody riled up. The one thing I think we did right with our kids is trying to get our kids to always just think about things and not just believe the first thing they hear. And I feel like, I'm not saying that we did it right in that our kids are exercising this, but I think we talked about it a lot. And I think part of that's my nature as a lawyer. I always hear one story and then I'm like, well, I've got to hear the rest of the stories, because there's usually a lot of different versions, and I want to see all the facts, and so I don't want to necessarily jump to judgment until I have all that. And so what I hope we've taught our kids is not to just, follow one celebrity or get all of your information, on TikTok. But I hope that, like, as they look at candidates and they think about politics, they actually do a little bit independent research and think about it.
Yeah. And I was proud of Maria. I mean, she ended up telling me who she voted for. And to be completely honest, I was surprised. And I didn't care. But I was like, oh, really? Why's that? And she was just like, I just wanted to vote for somebody that in my heart I felt good about when I went to sleep at night.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And she was like, it's my first presidential election, and I just wanted, and I was like, you know what? You can never go wrong. You vote your heart.
Yeah.
I mean, I've done that so many times and voted for, think about even, elections where you didn't like either candidate.
Yeah.
So you know what? I'm going to vote for somebody else, if knowing that they won't win, but
Right.
at least I know that, man, I went to bed tonight knowing I didn't contribute to whatever,
Yeah.
So yeah, I was proud of her. So
As an aside and a shout out to teachers, though, we talked about this too. She had a teacher, and we think it might have been one of her teachers. I can't be sure, but I think it might have been one of her teachers that passed away that she loved and took a lot of classes with. But one of her teachers got all of the students to take a test to see what political party they matched up with the most. And I think it really influenced her. We talked about that later. She talked about that. The other thing that really influenced Maria and was a big blessing for our family was she had a teacher that got her to go through and look at the colleges she was thinking about, and she did all the numbers. And I remember she was like, if I went to UNC School of the Arts, I can go for 3 or 4 years for what 1 year at SCAD or some of these other art colleges will cost. And we had tried to tell her that multiple times and it didn't get through, but the exercise of doing that in class was really powerful. So anyway, that's when I just love teachers and want to hug them when they've done something like that, when you see your kids. And so I just wanted to say that for the teachers that listen, all one of you maybe, that's out there, that like it does make a difference, and you never know what these kids are like listening to and picking up on that like influences them much later, many years later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, yeah. All right. Well, that's it. That's the intersection today.
Oh.
So we hit all 4 topics.
But you told me there was a story about my mom.
There is. So we're going to get into that. And it's not really so much a story. So this is the bonus portion. I told you I was going to read some comments, give you a question. So, last week we talked about which of our family members, our parents, would find the podcast, listen to the podcast. I never heard from my dad if he listened or not. My mom said she tried to listen. It started and then turned off, and she didn't listen anymore. And I sent her another link. I never did hear if she listened or not. Shirley, Beth's mom, who we both voted would be more likely than anybody to listen. When I asked her if she had listened, she tried to back. Basically, what she said is, actually, I just forgot to listen. So
yes, that is what she said.
she didn't want to listen, but she did. And so she sent me her thoughts.
I cannot
she said, I loved the podcast. Tommy listened too.
Oh, see, we did think Dad might. Okay, yeah.
She said, but I don't like the name Meth. Yeah. It happens.
This could be we're not doing good with the youngest demographics, and this could be, the name could be what alienates the older generations.
It could be.
Yeah, we're going to have to work on our marketing.
Yeah, and when, the Spotify will give me the breakdown of everybody who's listening, just as far as like where they're from, country-wise, age, that kind of thing. So yeah, Spotify Big Brother is watching you. But we have 0 listeners between the ages of 0 and 22.
That's why we know none of our kids have listened.
Yes. All right, so here we go. Here's the comments. You haven't heard any of the comments?
Mm-mm.
All right. PW Lawyer Mom says best podcast ever.
Oh, wonder who she is.
Very biased.
Yeah.
Now, there is a Madeline on here. Madeline is 18, 19 years old, but I also heard it was an adult actually signed in accidentally under her account and commented and listened. Okay. So anyway, Madeline wrote, I love meth. Mark writes, great episode, you two. I look forward to seeing what else you guys discuss. That's good.
Yes.
Jerry says, great podcast.
Aw.
That's right. Julie says, this is great.
Nice.
Mrs. Hinton says, I'm listening.
Good.
Keep it up. Sammy says, fake news. No actual meth was found on this podcast. I was a bit surprised board gaming was not the 5th weekly topic. Well, Sammy, I've got something for you because we're going to talk about board gaming here in about 30 seconds. Here's 2 that I thought you'd like. Carissa, I think she's by me a coworker of yours, said, I'm a big fan of meth.
I won't let work find out.
And then there's Sheila, who I think might also know you. She said, Beth, You are a natural. Keep it up. Love you guys. By the way, I know what you look like.
Ooh.
LOL. So I'm a little jealous because that means you got your first stalker.
Oh.
That's the way I read that. I know what you look like. So
this is why we tell our kids to be careful with text messages because you can't read tone.
That's right.
Yeah.
I think that's how, when I read it, that's what I was like, I know what you look like. That's how I read it, Sheila.
No,
So,
Sheila, I know it wasn't like that.
You
I'm
don't
sure
know
it
that.
was much
You don't
more
know.
innocent.
You don't
I don't
know.
even know which Sheila it is, but
All
I bet
right.
it was innocent.
And we had our first question. So, James from Oklahoma.
Oh, goodness. Okay.
What do you mean? We don't know this guy. That's a terrible thing to say.
Okay.
He may be a loving dad or a crappy pastor. I don't know.
Yes.
Or both.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted to know, is there any sort of parenting warp zone, like in Super Mario Brothers, where you get to skip to early adolescence and go right to later high school and the college phase?
Oh, he wishes. Absolutely not. No.
Yeah, this sounds like a man that has one or more adolescents at home.
Yes.
Preteens.
Yes.
And he's ready just to fast forward on this.
Many nights were spent very sad or angry or without sleep during those years.
Yeah.
But for another day, I think parenting adult kids is the hardest.
It is. I would agree. I think
Yeah.
parenting adult kids is the hardest. So, James, hang in there. If you think this is bad, it only gets worse.
Exactly.
Right.
Yes. So is that the warp zone that he's kind of? I guess that's not good.
It's warped, that's for sure.
Yes.
But yeah, sorry, there's no get out of jail quick card there.
No.
You knew what you were doing when you got these kids. That's all I'm saying.
There's
you gotta go
really
through it.
cool things about parenting adult kids, but it's so hard. So
Yeah,
but
it
that'll
is.
be a talk for another day.
It is.
Yeah.
All right, so we're gonna wrap up with story time with Mike. Last week we didn't have a title. We were calling ourselves Meth, which is Mike and Beth.
But now we know that might alienate the older generation.
We can't.
So,
we can't alienate the crowd. So we may sprinkle in a little meth now and then, but we're going to try to keep it off the table.
Yeah.
But we did come up with the title, Hey, Are You Still There? And so here's how that happened. Beth and I play Board Game Arena. Board Game Arena is a board game website that has all kinds of board games, hundreds of board games on there. Stuff like Ticket to Ride, Catan, Azul,
Potion
Explosion, Century Spice Road. I mean, all the modern board games are all there. They're pretty much all there. And you play it on your computer. And one of my very best friends, Ross, plays with us quite a bit. And in fact, the three of us play together 4 or 5 nights a week. And so it's not unusual around 8 o'clock that Beth is sitting on the couch with her laptop. I'm sitting at our kitchen bar with my laptop, and I've called Ross, and I have Ross on speakerphone, and he's on his computer at his house. And the three of us just talk and play board games, and it's a lot of fun. Well, there's a feature, because most people don't do that. Most of the time, you're playing with people that live in other parts of the country.
Or other countries.
Yeah. Spain, Brazil, Italy. We had somebody the other night from Papua New Guinea.
Yeah.
And all Beth could envision was that person was sitting there playing Board Game Arena, chewing on somebody's leg.
That is not true.
You said, quote, we may be playing with a cannibal.
Stop.
That's what you said. That is what you said.
Stop it.
True or false?
False.
That is a lie. So anyway, you play from people all over the world. Because you do this, you can't always chat with them, obviously, like verbally, audibly. So they have a chat box, and it's kind of a little chat room, and you can type stuff. And one of the cool things about the chat box is they have pre-made sayings. And so it may be stuff like, good game, good luck and have fun, stuff like that. Well, one of the things that's on there is, hey, comma, are you still there? Because as you're playing games with people, you're on a timer. And usually it's about a 1 minute or 2 minute timer for your turn. And so you sit there and you wait, and it's time's clicking down, and you can see it. And they got 2 minutes to make a move, and now it's like 40 seconds left, 20 seconds left. And you're like, come on. And the thing of it is, if they don't make a move, the game just don't move on without them. You're just kind of stuck unless you end up getting to a certain point and you kick them out. But so you have that feature, hey, are you still there? And sometimes people will use it on one another. And I've done this. I'll do my move. I'll get busy doing something else. And then all of a sudden I get back and I'm like, oh, dang, I missed my move. And I'll see somebody had typed, hey, are you still there? So, Beth, what happens when I do that to you?
I get really angry when you do the, hey, are you still there? Because oftentimes something will have just happened on my computer. Like every once in a while there's a little glitch. And like I might have to say something like, I might have to almost log out and log back in, essentially. Or I will tell you, Mike, I have to run and, do this really quickly. Like put the clothes from the washer to the dryer. I'll be right back. And you immediately will do, hey, are you still there? Multiple times when you know that I've just told you that I'm either having computer issues or that I have to step away for 1 minute.
Sometimes you're just sitting there staring at your computer.
No.
Sometimes you don't know what you're doing, or sometimes you're on your phone.
No, oftentimes it's because I'm thinking
and
being strategic.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you're like, hey, are you still there? And I'm like, I'm still there. I'm thinking.
And that's what makes it so funny, is I know you're right there.
Yes.
And I can say that because you're literally sitting 3 feet from me.
Yes.
But it's so much more fun to hit that little thing that says, hey, are you still there?
Instead of just asking.
And just see you go crazy.
Yes.
Because Ross and we laugh because it's like, why are you know we're going to do that. He does it too to Beth.
Yes.
Why do you still let it get to you?
I don't know. This is the whole thing. Why do I let anything get to me? But it's like you poke the sleeping bear. You don't know when to let it go sometimes, so you just keep poking and poking.
So last Sunday night, Ross and Beth and I are playing Board Game Arena. We're talking about the podcast. And sure enough, Beth's taking forever.
I think this was somebody else, not me, taking forever.
It was you.
Okay.
I promise it was you.
Well.
And I hit the little, hey, are you still there? And Ross and I started laughing. And I just said, you know what? That would be a funny name for our podcast. And Ross was like, yeah, that would be a good name for your podcast. And I was like, man, that would be awesome to have a And then I said, Beth, what do you think? And she said, well, it's better than meth.
Yes.
And so I did a quick search. There's not another podcast on the planet called Hey, Are You Still There? I can't believe they're in. So I snagged that baby up real quick. And so so it started out as a joke on Beth.
Yes.
Hey, are you still there?
As most things do seem to start out in our life. But
A joke's on you. You married me.
Mm-hmm.
But I actually thought a lot about it this week. This is I'm gonna put on Pastor Mike hat right now.
Okay.
I got to thinking, this may be the perfect name and description for this podcast. How many times in marriage do you want to say to your spouse, hey, are you still there?
Yeah.
And you go through dead periods, it feels like. You go through periods where you feel like you're distant from one another, just not clicking. And you just want to say, hey, are you still there?
Yeah.
Like, emotionally, mentally, socially, spiritually. Your family. If you have kids that are grown, for the first 8 to 10 years of their lives, they don't want to be anywhere but in your pocket. And then all of a sudden they hit puberty and teen years, and they want to be anywhere but in the same room with you.
Yes.
And you want to scream out to your kid, hey, are you still there? Our careers. I don't think anyone graduates college or high school or college and says, man, I really hope I'm just a number in a company.
Yeah.
That you have some type of dream. Like, this is what I want to do. I want to own my own business, or I want to, be this accomplished teacher, doctor, nurse, or whatever. And then you get into the machine, which is the American workforce. And sometimes you just want to yell, hey, are you still there? To your boss. Maybe even to yourself. You need to ask yourself, is that person, that guy and girl who dreamed of doing something better than this, are you still there? And then in ministry, I thought about it in two folds. One, as a pastor, sometimes I want to scream at my congregation, are you still there? Like, are we still, like, you go through seasons where it feels like your congregation is so excited and they're on fire for Jesus and they're willing to do anything you ask or point them. And then there's other times where it feels like, man, you're just dragging them down the road and you just want to yell at your congregation, hey, are you still there? But I think there's times as a pastor and as if you're a believer, you kind of yell that out to God.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Hey, are you still there? Like, I'm sure you felt that way this week, Beth. You had a rough week.
I did have a bad
And there was
week,
probably times when you wanted to say, hey, God, are you still there? You know? And so that's what this podcast is about. It's one of these God things. The title was picked as a joke, but it really isn't a joke. This is really what life is about. Hey, are you still there? My spouse, my family, my job, God, are you still there? And so I appreciate you hanging on with us this week, getting another little glimpse into what this podcast may be, could be. And so anyway, I guess that's it for us. Beth, anything else you want to add?
I don't think so. I think that's all.
Okay.
I hope that we gain 2 more listeners. That would be crazy.
All right, so you want 31 listeners for this podcast?
Well, yeah, and what would really be cool is if we could get a young person and an old person.
That's the challenge.
Yeah.
If we can get one person 60 and older and
Yes.
one person 22 and under
Yes, that would be
to listen.
such an accomplishment.
Now, I left out the big part. We have 13 followers.
Oh, wow. 13.
I mean, I thought about it. Jesus only had 12. And I'm sorry, God. That was a Jesus joke. Lord, I apologize. But that was bad. But yeah, so we have 13 followers. So maybe we can pick up some more followers this week.
Yeah, I'm sure. I just think we're on a roll now. I could just see us getting one day up to 20 followers.
Gosh,
one day.
I can only dream.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. So your mission for the week, listeners, Christmas.
Go recruit a young person.
Recruit a young person.
To listen to our podcast.
Recruit a young person. Visit an old person in a nursing home. Get them to listen.
But make sure you log in under their account because it won't count for us if they're logged in.
Tell them it's Charles Stanley.
Yeah.
They won't know the difference.
Yeah.
If it's an old person.
Yeah.
And then Christmas. We want to know. Leave a comment.
Yeah.
Do you when is the right time for this? And so for decorating and things like that. How early is too early? How late is too late? That kind of thing. So that's kind of your challenge for the week. Thank you so much, everyone who's listened so far the last 2 weeks. We had a lot of fun with this. So I'm going to say goodbye now.
I'll say goodbye too.
All right, and we'll see you next week.